There's a very famous painting that shows what appears to be men in crafts flying through the sky in the background of an ancient painting.
The idea that ancient Vatican paintings predicted the future might sound a little crazy, but when you really look at them, there are some interesting details that seem to have predicted events or themes that came up centuries later. Here are some of the most ancient Vatican paintings ever. 1. Sistine Chapel Roof. Michelangelo was an Italian Renaissance genius, a sculptor, painter, architect, draftsman, and even a poet. The guy was basically a one-man creative powerhouse. Born into a noble family in 1475, he had art in his veins from the start. In 1488, at just 13, he became an apprentice to the famous painter Domenico Ghirlandaio. But Michelangelo wasn't one to stick with the expected path. Just a year later, he shifted gears to work under the sculptor Bertoldo di Giovanni, who was a big deal in Florence at the time. Michelangelo's career saw him bouncing between Florence, Bologna, and Rome, leaving masterpieces everywhere he went. His greatest work was probably the Sistine Chapel ceiling, a project that Pope Julius II roped him into in 1508 as part of the grand rebuilding of St. Peter's Basilica in Rome. But the thing is, Michelangelo wasn't even into it at first. He considered himself a sculptor at heart, not a painter. And this massive mural wasn't exactly his dream job. Still, when the Pope calls, you don't say no. The project ended up consuming his life for 4 intense years. Michelangelo painted the entire ceiling by himself, a feat that's still mind-blowing when you think about the scale and detail. Along the way, his artistic style shifted and grew. His mastery of anatomy, which came from years of sculpting, shines through in the figures he painted. Each pose feels so alive, like a nod to the classical sculptures of ancient Greece and Rome that he admired. Michelangelo didn't just wing it either. He made around 300 sketches to plan out his vision. These drawings, called cartoons, were blown up and transferred to the ceiling. But instead of focusing on intricate backgrounds or scenic details, he zeroed in on the figures themselves, their gestures, their movements, their sheer presence. The main panels on the ceiling tell stories from the book of Genesis, starting with the creation of the world and ending with Noah's slightly embarrassing post-flood drunken escapade. Surrounding these are 10 medallions with more Old Testament scenes. Prophets and sibyls sit along the edges of the ceiling, looking all wise and mystical. And then there are the ignudi, nude male figures, perched around the central panels, adding even more drama and energy to the whole masterpiece. 2. The Mass of Bolsena. Raphael, one of the Renaissance's big names, was born in Urbino, a little gem of a town in central Italy. His hometown was a hub of art and culture, home to powerful Renaissance courts like the Montefeltro and Gonzaga families. Raphael's dad, Giovanni Santi, was a small-time painter and poet who occasionally worked for the Duke of Mantua. That connection probably gave young Raphael a leg up, landing him a spot in the workshop of the famous painter Pietro Perugino. Even though Raphael's life was cut tragically short, he died in his late 30s, he managed to churn out a lifetime's worth of masterpieces. One of his standout works is The Mass of Bolsena, a fresco that's part of the stanza della Elidoro in the Vatican. This room is basically a giant tribute to divine intervention, with dramatic biblical and historical stories painted on its walls. Raphael didn't just slap these scenes onto the walls. He wove them into detailed, grand architectural settings, making everything feel larger than life. The Mass of Bolsena tells a fascinating story from the 13th century. According to legend, a priest passing through Bolsena, a town in central Italy, was struggling with doubt about transubstantiation. The idea that the bread and wine of communion literally become the body and blood of Christ. During a Mass, the communion wafer he was holding started to bleed. Naturally, this was declared a miracle, and the priest's doubts were presumably put to rest. Raphael brings this story to life with incredible detail. The fresco shows the priest looking humbled and awestruck as he administers the sacraments. But Raphael doesn't stop there. He included Pope Julius II in the scene. The Pope, who actually commissioned Raphael to paint the room, is kneeling just to the right of the altar, paying homage to the miracle. This nod to Julius's 1506 visit to the relic ties the Church's past and present together in a way that feels almost seamless. 3. Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. This painting might catch you off guard at first, but it's actually one of the most iconic pieces in the Vatican collection. It's called the Garden of Eden, and it was created by Wenzel Peter, a painter with a talent for capturing animals. Wenzel Peter was what's called an animalist painter, meaning he specialized in painting animals of all kinds. He was so focused on this craft that he got insanely good at it. The animals he painted look so lifelike that it's almost like looking at a photograph. Whether they're sitting, standing, or just hanging out, every creature in this painting feels real enough to jump off the canvas. In the Garden of Eden, Peter brings the biblical story to life. At the center, you'll find Adam and Eve, the very first humans, living their best lives in paradise. They're portrayed as two young, peaceful people enjoying their perfect surroundings. Peter chose to present them in a way that's modest and respectful. Nothing too graphic or awkward here. Their bodies are naturally covered by the scenery, keeping things tasteful while still sticking to the story. The animals is where this painting really shines. There are over 200 animals scattered throughout the scene, and they come from all over the world. Peter didn't just paint the usual suspects like deer or birds. He included lions, elephants, tigers, monkeys, and even exotic creatures you might not expect to see. The coolest part is that all these animals, no matter how different they are living in total harmony. Lions sit peacefully next to lambs. Birds perch calmly near snakes. And every creature seems to belong. It's a stunning vision of what the world was like before humans messed it all up, when everything, including animals and people, lived together in peace. 4. Saint Jerome. Saint Jerome, in the Wilderness, is an unfinished painting by Leonardo da Vinci, dating back to around 1480-1490. Even though it's incomplete, it still gives us a glimpse into Leonardo's genius and his creative process. The painting is an oil draft on a wooden panel, and over time, the panel was cut into 5 pieces after Leonardo's death. Thankfully, someone took on the monumental task of restoring it to its original form, though a small triangle piece is still missing. This painting shows Saint Jerome, an old man, during his time as a hermit in the Syrian desert. According to legend, he lived a life of solitude and penance out there, reflecting deeply on his faith. In the painting, he's kneeling in a rocky, wild landscape, looking toward a crucifix faintly sketched in on the far right side. He's holding a rock in his right hand. This was his way of showing penance by striking his chest with it. At Jerome's feet lies a lion, a nod to the story of him removing a thorn from the lion's paw. From that moment on, the lion became his loyal companion. Also, in the painting, there's a cardinal's hat, which is another symbol tied to Jerome, as he's considered one of the doctors of the Church in Western Christianity. The background is divided into two striking halves. On the left, you see a distant, misty landscape with a lake and towering mountains. On the right, through the rocky terrain, there's a faintly drawn church. This could symbolize the Church's role in guiding Jerome and his ultimate hope for heaven. What's interesting about this painting is how innovative it was for its time. St. Jerome's pose is set in an oblique trapezoid form, which contrasts with the soft curves of the lion, whose body forms an S shape at the bottom of the painting. Leonardo's attention to anatomy is also clear. Just look at the detailed muscles in Jerome's neck and shoulders. It's believed this was one of Leonardo's first attempts at anatomical studies. The painting's theme is deeply tied to penitence, something central to many religious works. St. Jerome, known for translating the Bible into Latin, is depicted in deep thought, meditating on Christ's crucifixion. Some scholars, like George Bent, have suggested a personal connection between Leonardo and this painting. Leonardo faced accusations of homosexual activity in 1476, though he was never convicted. 5. Transfiguration. The Transfiguration is one of the most iconic paintings by Raphael, and it also happens to be his last masterpiece. He started working on it around 1517, commissioned by Cardinal Giulio de' Medici. The painting was meant to be an altarpiece for Narbonne Cathedral in France, but Raphael passed away in 1520 before he could see it completed. Now, it's proudly displayed in the Vatican museums. This painting isn't just about one event from the Bible, it tells two stories. At the top, you see the Transfiguration of Christ, where Jesus appears glowing in divine glory on Mount Tabor, flanked by Moses and Elijah. Below that, Raphael added a second scene, the healing of a possessed boy. This unusual combination gives the painting a sense of spiritual tension and dynamic energy. The upper half is serene and heavenly, while the lower half is chaotic and emotional. It's like Raphael was trying to show two sides of faith, the divine power of Christ and the struggles of human suffering. Raphael was under a lot of pressure when he worked on this. At the same time, another artist, Sebastiano del Piombo, was painting the raising of Lazarus with guidance from none other than Michelangelo. This sparked a bit of friendly rivalry between Raphael and Michelangelo, with their works being seen as a competition of styles. Raphael poured his heart into the Transfiguration, adding more figures and details, trying to outshine Sebastiano's work. When Raphael died unexpectedly in 1520, the painting was unfinished. It was placed above his casket during his funeral, a fitting tribute to his incredible talent. Later, it was displayed alongside the raising of Lazarus in the Vatican, further fueling comparisons between the two masterpieces. Over the years, the Transfiguration became hugely famous. In fact, it was considered one of the greatest oil paintings for centuries. During Napoleon's campaigns, French troops seized it and took it to the Louvre in Paris, where it became a centerpiece for art lovers and even inspired artists like Turner. After Napoleon's defeat, it was returned to the Vatican, where it found a permanent home. 6. Vision of the Cross. The Vision of the Cross is a fascinating fresco created between 1520 and 1524. Although it's credited to Raphael, the painting was actually completed by his talented team of assistants, Gianfrancesco Penni, Giulio Romano, and Raffaellino del Colle, after Raphael's death in 1520. The work is part of the grand decorations in the Stanze di Raffaello in the Apostolic Palace at the Vatican. Specifically, this fresco is in the Sala di Costantino, or Hall of Constantine. The scene depicts Emperor Constantine I on the eve of the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD. The story goes that before the battle, Constantine saw a vision of a cross in the sky, accompanied by a divine message, in hoc signo vinces, which translates from Latin as, "In this sign you shall conquer." Inspired by this vision, Constantine adopted the Christian cross as his symbol, leading to his victory and eventually the Christianization of the Roman Empire. This moment is considered a turning point in history, and the fresco captures its dramatic essence. The painting itself is full of activity and symbolism. Constantine is front and center, gazing at the miraculous cross, which is illuminated in the sky. Surrounding him is a chaotic and colorful mix of soldiers, clergy, and mythical elements. You'll notice all sorts of unexpected details in the scene, like a dragon, a dwarf, and even two popes. The composition is jam-packed, almost to the point of being overwhelming. But that's part of its charm. It feels like a larger-than-life moment, full of divine energy and historical weight. That said, the fresco does have its quirks. The proportions of some figures are a little strange, with some soldiers looking oddly small compared to others, even though they're closer to the viewer. This might have been an oversight by Raphael's assistants, or just the result of working on such a massive and ambitious piece. 7. Liberation of St. Peter. The Liberation of St. Peter is a fresco by Raphael, created in 1514 as part of his commission to decorate the rooms that make up the Stanza di Raffaello, or Raphael rooms, in the Apostolic Palace in the Vatican. The painting is found in the Stanza di Eliodoro, which is named after another of Raphael's frescoes, the expulsion of Heliodorus from the temple. This artwork depicts the dramatic story from the Bible, in which St. Peter is freed from prison by an angel, as described in Acts 12. Raphael's Liberation of St. Peter is a great example of his skill in using perspective and symmetry to tell a story. The fresco is divided into 3 main scenes, and each is framed by clever architectural elements and staircases that guide the viewer's eye. In the middle of the composition, we see the angel waking up Peter, who's lying in his prison cell, shackled and asleep. The angel gently rouses him, preparing to guide him out of the prison. On the right side, the angel leads Peter past the sleeping guards, making their escape seem calm and effortless. However, things aren't quite as peaceful on the left side of the fresco. One of the guards notices a mysterious light coming from Peter's cell, and he wakes up his comrade. He points up to the light, which draws attention to the miracle happening right before their eyes. This part of the fresco adds a sense of drama and tension to the otherwise tranquil scene of Peter's escape. While the guards are unaware of what's happening, there's an obvious sense that something miraculous is unfolding just out of their reach. Raphael's use of light and dark in this fresco is really striking. The soft, glowing light from the angel contrasts with the dim, almost ominous atmosphere surrounding the prison, creating a clear division between the divine intervention and the mundane world of the soldiers. 8. School of Athens. The School of Athens is one of Raphael's most famous frescoes, painted between 1509 and 1511, as part of a larger commission by Pope Julius II to decorate the rooms of the Apostolic Palace, now known as the Stanza di Raffaello, in Vatican City. It's housed in the Stanza della Segnatura and is part of a series of 4 frescoes that represent different branches of knowledge. This one, focused on philosophy, stands out because of its sheer scale, the number of famous figures depicted, and the overall mastery of composition and perspective. In the fresco, Raphael imagines a grand gathering of ancient Greek philosophers, mathematicians, and scientists, with the central figures being Plato and Aristotle. The two are positioned at the heart of the painting, flanked by other renowned thinkers like Socrates, Pythagoras, and Archimedes. However, many of the figures in the painting are less easily identifiable, and Raphael didn't leave a clear guide to who's who. So much of the identification is based on conjecture. Some of these figures are believed to represent famous people from Raphael's own time, including portraits of contemporaries like Leonardo da Vinci and Michelangelo, who are thought to be symbolically represented as Plato and Heraclitus, respectively. Raphael even included a self-portrait, which can be found next to Ptolemy. The fresco is known for its use of perspective, which was a hallmark of Renaissance art. Raphael learned a great deal about this from studying Leonardo da Vinci, and it's clear that Raphael took the rules of perspective to heart when creating this massive scene. The figures in the painting are arranged in a way that creates a harmonious flow, with the central vanishing point drawing the viewer's eye towards the 2 main philosophers. The use of space makes the figures seem as though they are interacting in a shared environment, which really brings the whole scene to life. One of the most notable aspects of the School of Athens is the way the 2 main figures, Plato and Aristotle, are depicted. Plato is shown holding his book Timaeus, while Aristotle holds his Nicomachean Ethics. The gesture of each philosopher is thought to represent their respective schools of thought. Plato, pointing upwards, symbolizes his belief in the world of ideal forms, things that exist beyond physical reality. Aristotle, on the other hand, gestures horizontally, indicating his focus on the physical world and the empirical study of nature. This contrast between their philosophies is often interpreted as the central theme of the painting. But the painting isn't just about philosophy. It also serves as a visual representation of how Renaissance thinkers viewed the rebirth of classical learning. The fact that Raphael incorporated famous artists and intellectuals from his own time into a scene that depicts ancient philosophers is a reflection of the way the Renaissance sought to reconnect with the intellectual traditions of ancient Greece and Rome. This fusion of ancient and modern worlds makes the fresco a symbol of the Renaissance's intellectual revival. 9. Martyrdom of Saint Erasmus. The Martyrdom of Saint Erasmus is a powerful painting by Nicholas Poussin, created in 1628 as part of a commission for the altar dedicated to Saint Erasmus of Formia in St. Peter's Basilica, Vatican City. The commission came from the fabric of St. Peter, and the painting was meant to be placed in the north transept, near another work by Valentin de Boulogne, The Martyrdom of St. Processus and St. Martinian. Initially, Pope Urban VIII had invited Pietro da Cortona to take on the project, but Poussin ended up with the commission, largely thanks to the support of his patron, Cassiano dal Pozzo, who was a key figure in the Barberini family. Poussin had already gained a solid reputation in Rome after creating works like The Capture of Jerusalem and The Death of Germanicus, which helped secure his place in the city's art scene. Before getting to the final painting, Poussin went through several stages of preparation. He made two important drawings, one of which is kept in the Biblioteca Ambrosiana in Milan, and the other is in the Uffizi in Florence. These were used as studies before he created a full-sized modello that is now in the National Gallery of Canada in Ottawa. Interestingly, the Martyrdom of St. Erasmus is the only painting by Poussin from his time in Rome that can still be seen in a public building in the city. It also holds the distinction of being the only altarpiece where Poussin actually signed his name, which was a rare move for the artist. After it was completed, the painting was moved to the Quirinal Palace, but it didn't stay there for long. In 1797, French troops seized it and took it to Paris, where it stayed in the Louvre until 1817. That's when it was finally returned to the Vatican, where it now resides in the Vatican museums. The scene Poussin depicts shows a dramatic moment from the life of St. Erasmus, also known as St. Elmo. Erasmus, who was Bishop of Antioch, is shown being tortured under the orders of the Roman Emperor Maximian Hercules. According to legend, Erasmus was subjected to various tortures, with the final one being the most brutal. The emperor had him tied to a table, and his intestines were slowly extracted by a windlass, a kind of mechanical winch. This torture is not from the Roman martyrology, but rather from The Golden Legend by Jacobus de Voragine, a popular medieval collection of saints' stories. In the legend, when ordered to sacrifice to the gods, Erasmus refuses and famously declares that he won't sacrifice to stone gods that resemble the emperor himself. At that moment, the statue of Jupiter collapses into dust, a symbolic act of divine intervention. The statue in Poussin's painting is not Jupiter, but Hercules, a nod to the emperor's nickname. Poussin was very conscious of the painting's placement, as it was meant to be viewed from an angle. So, he composed the piece with diagonals that lead the viewer's eye from the bottom left, where St. Erasmus's head is, all the way up to the top right, where the statue and a priest are located. Unlike other depictions of martyrdom, Poussin doesn't focus on the gore or the brutality of the scene. Instead, he emphasizes St. Erasmus's stoic resistance and unwavering faith in the face of his suffering. 10. The Pietà. Vincent van Gogh's Pietà, which can be found in the Vatican museums, is an interesting and often underappreciated piece that stands out in the context of his work. It's a version of a classic religious theme, but with Van Gogh's signature emotional depth and distinctive style. This painting is actually one of two versions Van Gogh created. The larger version is housed in the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, while the smaller one was painted for his sister, Wilhelmine, just before his death in 1890. So, how did this painting come to be? Van Gogh was in a mental institution in Saint-Rémy de Provence when he started working on it. He had received a lithograph of Eugène Delacroix's Pietà from his brother Theo, but unfortunately, the print was damaged. Van Gogh was really disappointed by this, as he had hoped to use it as a reference for his own version. In one of his letters to Theo, Van Gogh expressed his frustration, but also mentioned how he decided to take the opportunity to create his own interpretation of the Pietà. In many ways, this was Van Gogh's way of coping with the loss of the lithograph, and also a reflection of his ongoing struggle with his mental health. When you look at Van Gogh's Pietà, you can tell it's inspired by Delacroix's work, but it's unmistakably Van Gogh. The color choices are more intense, and there's an emotional rawness to the piece that's typical of his style. Mary, the mother of Christ, is shown with an expression of deep sorrow, with her hands extended in a large, almost desperate gesture of grief. Her face radiates hopelessness, while Christ's body is limp, with his eyes closed in death. But what's especially striking here is that Van Gogh's focus is less on Christ's suffering and more on Mary's emotional state. Instead of just showing her as a grieving mother, Van Gogh emphasizes the depth of her despair. Do you think some of these paintings predicted the future? Or maybe it was all just one big coincidence?